Alright fellas, my guess is that during the last video you probably got a good understanding of what we are talking about when I made mention of the term database, or probably you had no idea whatsoever about what I was talking about. Not to worry, I'm sure we're going to get there right now in this particular video. Now we're going to start by simply clicking on the blank database. So if you have not started your own version of Microsoft Access, or if you have closed it, please let's open it up. If you're using Microsoft Access 27, I just need you to open the program and look out for blank database. It should be at the top somewhere in this area. uh, that should be where it should be. So just look out for blank database. It's going to be selected, but in case it's not, just click on it once. Okay. Once you've done that, you can now come down. You should see to your right somewhere, you're going to see file name and a label, or a text box opened there with the name database in there, and a button create either at the bottom or to the right of it. Now over here, this is what we are expected to do here. Before Access begins to create a database for you, it smartly decides that before your database is even created, the database should have a name. And so it's more like a way to make sure that everything you're working with is always going to be saved. Okay, so unlike Excel, where you just start your work and you don't have to save until you need to, or in Word, in Access, you're required to give your database a name first off. It's important. All right, now that's the first thing you would do. So in this case, I'm just going to give my database a the name sample. Okay, you might want to do that as well. That's just the name that is going to appear at the title bar, so not to worry, that's the name I'm going to give the database I have created. Okay, so having entered the sample as my database, I can click on create. And notice that at your left here, we're looking at so many databases that had been opened before. So if I click on any of these ones, what I expect to see is that these databases which are already on this computer are going to get opened. Now, for databases that are not on the list, I will just click on open to search for such databases and use them. Okay, and we have some other tools from the options where we make some certain settings to how our entry of data would be worked out. You might not, you might always never use that. Okay, so I'm just going to skip that, and then exiting database, you could click on the exit button or the close button at the top here. Okay, so back to what we're saying. When you give your file name the name sample, I'd like you to click on create. Once you click on create, you will be welcomed with this fine screen and a first object to your left with the name table. Can we see that? Yes, the first object to my left there is named table. Now this area where we have your table listed here is referred to as a navigation pane. You can see the name there. I just hid mine. So essentially every object that you create in your database is always going to be reflected here. So take note that we're trying to say that when we talk about database objects like your tables, your queries, your reports, and your forms, all of these objects can be contained in one database. Exactly, they all can be contained in one database. That is what we're saying, and so don't get confused there. Now, having mentioned that, what we have here is table 1. In the last video where we looked at the sample database for the students database, I mentioned something about fields and records. Right now, it's important that you have a good understanding of what those two terms mean, because as it concerns databases, what you're always doing, in fact, I think, bottom line, your job as a database administrator, I don't believe I just promoted you guys now. Okay, yeah, you will eventually become database administrators. It's a good thing. Now, as a database administrator, 90% of the job you will do when you're working with Microsoft Access is simple. You're always going to be creating fields. Always, always, always. And that is what tables like helps us do. We create fields. Okay, fine. Now, having that point in mind, let us pay attention now to what we have at our home ribbon. We're going to be looking at some of all the tools here and see how it flows. Now, starting from the left, we have the views group, where we have different ways of viewing our table. Okay, I could say different ways, I could say different perspectives of looking at or viewing our table. Presently, we have two views, that is the datasheet view and then the design view. Now, if you're looking at the way it is arranged right now, you'll see that the datasheet view is turned on. Looking at this area, it's turned on, whereas the design view is turned off. You can see that very clearly also from here. There's a datasheet view and then you have the design view here at the bottom. Okay, so what is the design view like? Let's find out. I can click on this button here or click on this down button here to activate this, or I could simply click on that. Alternatively, I could still come down to the bottom here and alternate between the two views, between the design view and the datasheet view. So let me do one of them. I'm just going to click on the design view, and always whenever I want to switch between the table and your design view, or a form and your design view, whichever, for the first time, you would always be required to give that particular database object a name. And so I'm just going to leave the default name at table 1. Okay, so that we'll see what we're doing. And we have our design view. Are we there? So if I'm alternating back, or I'm going back to where I just came from, which is my datasheet view, I can simply click on this button there and I am back to where I am, or where I came from. Do you get that? So that's essentially what we're saying when we're switching views. Now, whenever we want to make any change, okay, to our database table, presently this database table is empty. It has no information. There are no fields. So for us to begin to create fields for our database object, or for our database object, we need to begin to add fields. Okay, and when we talk about adding fields, we are simply saying all those titles we see at the top here of each database we create, those are going to be our fields. Now, see what I mean. In my design view, say I enter something like that, username, user address. Okay, I'm just going to enter these two. Let's just get an idea of what we're saying, and then I save this. Okay, and then I switch back to my datasheet view. Look at this particular table. Are there some new items here? In case you're confused, just pause the video right now, go back a minute behind and play again. Now you should notice something different. Before now, we didn't have the username field, we didn't have the user address field, we simply had the ID field and then the click to add field, which by the way is not active at the design view, because the click to add view is simply allowing us to add fields from this area if we so wish. And so how do we add a new field here without having to go to the design view? It's simple. I just need to click on that button there and then select a data type. Okay, in this case I'm going to use number and enter date. Okay, let's put it this way, date of birth. Okay, I know you're wondering, what did I mean by data type? Okay, now to understand data type, we'll need to just go back over here and break it down. Okay, no, I prefer doing that much later. So let me just get back here. So we're saying then that in this particular table that I have created, we're looking at these as the fields. So what then are the records? The records will then be any information I enter into each of these columns or each of these cells. Okay, if you already have a background with Excel, that's what we usually call these small boxes here. So I'm saying this is Jones. I'm saying he stays in Jos. I'm also saying his date of birth is 22222. Okay, and the next person is Nike. Okay, and sorry, that is Nike. Okay, and let's say she stays in Jos. Okay, and her date of birth is 333333. Okay, now we can keep adding. So I'm just going to add a whole lot of gibberish right now and just keep going down 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 down. Now notice that as I keep going down, I have an almost unlimited amount or unlimited space to keep adding information and adding information and adding information into my table. Now you can see that from our status bar somewhere here, you see the amount of records that I have, and based on this last number I entered or alphabet I entered, it tells me that I have 37 records. So we are saying then that as far as your databases are concerned, you're working with your fields and your records. All we needed to do simple was this: create fields. We just went ahead to the design view and created the three fields that we created. That was it. Okay, and having entered the three fields that we created, all what the person now that owns the database would do would be to begin to enter all of the records inside the database. So we're saying in essence that you can get paid for designing a database for an individual, an organization, or a group, and really get paid nicely. That's the point. That's the point. Don't mind me thinking about that, but what you learn stuff simply because you want to get value for what you spent. Okay, so you wouldn't have bought this video series if you didn't want to, be paid for the knowledge you are acquiring right now. So your ability to really design a database and make that database make sense, okay, is key to your being paid. So we're saying then that you're creating fields. That's what you're doing. You're creating fields, creating fields all the way. I'll follow in. Beautiful. So I'm just going to go over this again. We said that you want to create a particular database table. You're entering fields. That is just what you're doing. You're simply entering fields. You're entering fields. You're entering fields. I'm going to keep singing that like a song. That is what you're doing. You are creating fields. And how do you create fields? It's simple. Your database is opened in this way. Your table is opened. You go over to the design view and then you begin to click on the field name and enter a field name of your choice. Is that clear? That is what you do. You enter a field name of your choice. Once you enter a field name of your choice, you're good to go. The moment you have a problem entering a field name, your database is not working, would not be able to work. Is that clear? Beautiful. Now let's go a step further now in this. Looking at the design view, you would see that, okay, we've just mentioned how the field name operates. Let's talk about the data type, and then we're going to come back and discuss this ID guy and actually tell you what the guy does. Now, in this particular database or in this particular table we're working with presently, you would notice that I have a username, a user address, and a date of birth. And looking or judging by the way the information should appear, or judging by the type of information that we expect to be entered into this particular table, you would agree with me that there are some of the information here that are going to be strictly alphabets, whereas there are some of them that are going to be strictly numbers, and there are some of them that are going to be a mixture of alphabets and numbers. Is that correct? Beautiful. That is what data type is about. And so your data type determines what type of data access should accept under a particular field. Let me check that again. A data type determines what type of data access should accept in a specific data field. an instance is your date of birth. Now if you remember, or if you recall, when I clicked on the click to add and I entered date of birth, the data type I selected was number. Now let me see myself entering text in here and going over to the next field. See the error message I get. I see it says that the value you enter does not match the number data type in this column. So I have defiled the principle there. I was supposed to enter strictly numbers because that is the data type that I selected. So because I went ahead and decided to type alphabets, it returns the error. I'll follow you. Good. So we're then saying that your data type is just the guide that determines the kind of data that should be entered. If the data type is conflicting with what your database should enter, you'd end up getting a database that is inconsistent, a database that is really not making sense. And interestingly, computer people are people who make sense. Okay, we're not crazy. We try to like things to make sense. I think that's what computer guys are about. And so let's now go back over to the design view and then see how this flows. Now, a username is basically looking at the name of a person, right? And because it's going to always be a name of a person, the likelihood is that everybody's name is going to always be in text or in alphabets, the letters of the alphabets. Hence, the data type is going to be text. Are you following? Beautiful. Now, because it is text, one can decide to go a bit further in looking at, okay, what then are the field properties? The field properties tend to determine or create some kind of criteria as to how the text that are going to be entered should be presented. Take for example, how many characters should be entered. Here says the field size is 255, and so we have a limit of 255 characters as it concerns entering whatever username we want to enter. When it concerns the format, we are displaying what layout we want that field to contain, and a whole lot of stuff. The good thing is that we hardly make any of these adjustments, but much later we're going to work with our field properties. Your address, because your address would always contain excuse me, because your address will always contain a mixture of text and alphabets. Here mentions that this data type is going to determine the types of values that users can store. And for your text tends to enter information that are both textual and numerical. So that means you can actually enter text that are a combination of text and numbers. An example is going to be your address. Now, a date of birth, simply because your date of birth is always going to be numbers, it means that for it to really make sense, you're going to be using the data type of number. Now, if you use a data type of text and you go ahead to enter numbers, you're not going to get it wrong. It's just that I promise you your database is going to be wacko. Okay, that's the word. It's going to be wacko. All right. Now we can now begin to think about other things that we could add into our database. Some databases can have pictures, and so if a database is supposed to have a picture, take for instance, we're saying a passport. Okay, what data type are we going to use? If we click on the down arrow there, we would see attachment, right? Yes, we see attachment there. Now if we're going further from there and probably we wanted to add something like notes, what we're going to be having there could be either an attachment or a memo. And a memo, actually, when you're looking at data type, refers to a long note. It's just basically a long note, which can be compared to notes. Are you seeing the trend here? Now what we're trying to then establish is, it's true that you're entering field names for your database, but then your field names should always have a corresponding data type that would make your field names smart. And the moment your field names are smart, your fields become smart. The moment your fields become smart, your database becomes smart. The moment your database becomes smart, you get paid smart. Okay, that's just the trend. That's just the graduation. So your fields that you create should have data types that make sense. If the data type you're entering for a particular field you create does not really convey any positive idea, you end up getting a messed up database. Okay, now your description field here, okay, at this point is just meant to help you do something, and that is simply to give a brief description of what is required for each field. Take for instance, okay, if you've actually if you recall when you were browsing, or where you probably were doing some registration online, you realize that when there's a column for you to enter some certain information and you take your mouse pointer to that location, you see a message that says do this, enter your name, enter username, and blah blah blah, right? That is the description field working. Now in Access we can do something like that. So for instance, we say for username we want the person, or somebody comes in and is unsure of what the person he or she needs to enter, we could say on that description we want the person to see this information: enter valid user name. Okay, that becomes a description. Now let's see if that is going to work. Before I do that, keep in mind that whenever you make any change to any database object, either at the design view or at the datasheet view, or wherever view you find yourself, always save. The moment you do not save, you might run into issues, so always save. Okay, so having saved, now let's go over to my datasheet view, and then let's click on that point. Now having clicked on this particular field, notice what happens here at the bottom: enter valid username. That is what we entered here. That's the description that we entered here. So for the fact that we entered that, it is displayed over here that we should enter a valid username. Now notice that, or rightly we can then conclude that your description is not compulsory to use in a database. It is not mandatory that you must have a description field. Okay, so it all depends on what or yeah, how you really want your database to work. It all depends on that. And so if you want a description to be included, that will make a whole lot of sense, fine and good. If you do not want it, please do not bother. Is that okay? All right, so let me go back to the datasheet view now, and let's look at that. Now as it stands now, we have about 37 records. Okay, I'm just going to get rid of some of these records because they are really serious gibberish. Just get rid of that way. Okay, now having taken out that particular information that we have entered, which was actually lengthy and messy all around, we can now go ahead and then explain further what we're saying. So we saw here that having entered the field names and we've entered the records, you see what happens when we added the other two. We added an attachment field and a notes field. Your attachment allows you to add a picture or whatever other information you want to add, which is external to your database, whereas your notes allows you to type in information about your data and all of those stuff. So if we wanted to add an attachment here, would double click on that particular button and then click on this add at this point, okay, where our computer is now open to us, and then we can select a picture in the computer from any location would want. So let's add that over there and click on OK. Fine. And so we can see the count has changed from 0 to 1. And so to view this particular image you've entered, I would need to open that up and then click on open. Okay, and that should open it. Don't mind my screen resolution, it doesn't really allow me to run this from here. But once you click on open, it should open that particular image we have added to our database. Who is lost? Okay, if you're lost, please just pause here and just go back a little. But I believe that at this point we've been able to probably have the ability to add some few pieces to what we mean when we're trying to talk about a database table as an example. And so essentially, when we're talking about a database table, typically that is what we're doing. We're simply entering, creating fields. As we create fields, we can then begin to add records. We create fields. As we create those fields, we give those fields a data type, a valid data type that makes sense. Okay, having done that, we can then save our database and we are almost good to go. Okay, so I'm just going to save the changes that I've made to this particular sample database, and if I wish, I can close my database and carry on working, right? All right, so in at this point, I'm going to stop here. Okay, I'm going to stop here, and let us absorb everything we've been able to do so far. I'd like you to try out creating this particular database table over and over again. I think that would like give you a better view of what we are really trying to achieve. Okay, in the next video we're going to build up upon this foundation and then see how we can then elaborate more on what else we could do with this database table that we have created. I hope that this part has been informative for you, and I'm sure you'll be dying to see me in the next round. So catch you.